The Edmonton Oilers came up just short in their pursuit of the Stanley Cup. It's time to start looking towards the offseason and how they can replicate the Florida Panthers going from Stanley Cup losers to Stanley Cup winners.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Zararis. Want to thank everybody who makes Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, your team every day. And before we get to today's episode, got to remind you, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, we are here at the opening stages of the NHL offseason. As soon as the Stanley Cup was awarded, the buyout window was open, got the draft, free agency opens next Monday. A whole lot is going to happen in a very short period of time. So, today's episode, first segment, we are going to talk priorities A, main priorities, the biggest priorities of the Oilers offseason. Segment 2, we are going to touch on some of the lower tier decisions that need to be made about some unrestricted free agents, some restricted free agents. And then the third segment, we'll wrap up. We'll talk about maybe some of the skill sets, some of the ideas the Oilers could be looking for to try and improve their roster in spite of what's going to be a difficult position salary cap wise, because that's the undercurrent of all of this. We exist in the NHL in 2024 where there just frankly isn't enough money in the system to commiserate maintaining a contender. The salary cap exists to penalize good teams. They want to keep player salaries down. And it's funny I bring that up because today, an Oilers legend, Glenn Sather, who's been with the Rangers organization for a quarter century now, he retired from professional hockey today. He's in his early 80s. And one of the major moves Glenn Sather made as a general manager pre-lockout, pre-2004 lockout, was giving Bobby Holik, who had been a third liner, a middle six tweener for the New Jersey Devils that had won a Stanley Cup, giving him a contract that was worth an average annual value of $9 million per season pre-lockout. There's a real argument the Bobby Holik contract, which gave him more average annual value as a third liner with the Devils to go play on the first line for the Rangers, than Leon Draisaitl got paid this past season. We are talking about an insane amount of money in the pre-salary cap era. So that's our starting point. The Oilers do not have a lot of cap space to play with. And frankly, because of that, they're going to have to get creative. And let's start here. I'm going to toggle this on. This is the Oilers depth chart right now. Not all of these players are under contract, but this is what we're working with. So you see Nuge, McDavid, Hyman, all under contract. Vander Kane is under contract. Leon Draisaitl, this upcoming season is the last year of his contract. Dylan Holloway to his right. The Oilers have team control. Now this is where it starts to get hairy. Warren Foegele, unrestricted free agent. Adam Henrique, unrestricted free agent. Connor Brown, unrestricted free agent. Matthias Janmark, unrestricted free agent. Corey Perry, unrestricted free agent. And then the left wing on the fourth line is Ryan McLeod, who is under team control, I believe, for one more season. I'm going to click over here just to make sure I'm reading this right. Yes, he is under team control for one more season, and then he is a restricted free agent. You go over to the defense, the 6 guys that were out there in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final very well could be the Oilers' defense for this upcoming season. We all know Darnell Nurse is under long-term team control. Matthias Ekholm has 2 more years. Cody Ceci has 1 more year. Brett Kulak has 2 more years. Philip Broberg is a restricted free agent this summer, so he will need to be taken care of. We'll talk about him a little bit later. And then Evan Bouchard. Evan Bouchard is a restricted free agent next year. So him and Draisaitl are on synchronized clocks. Both of those guys will need extensions for next summer. Now, let's start here because this will be the big talking point. Until the Oilers get a Draisaitl deal rectified, and I'm going to go back to full screen here while we're talking, until the Oilers get a Draisaitl deal done, this is going to drive all of the conversation in the National Hockey League because there are 31 other teams in the league that would like to have Leon Draisaitl on. We know Draisaitl was playing with an injury during the Stanley Cup final, part of why he was a little bit more ineffective than you would typically expect, a finger injury and an upper body injury. So when you're dealing with this, there are a lot of factors to consider. Number one, I think the Oilers are going to do whatever it takes to keep Draisaitl. I think that is the type of player that if you have to eat some bad money on a contract to buy someone out to make more cap space to keep him, you're going to do it. By all accounts, the Oilers are probably going to buy out goaltender Jack Campbell as soon as they're ready to get that going. Because you got to remember, the Oilers were in the Stanley Cup final, and I know their front office people are in a weird state right now where they don't know if Ken Holland is going to maintain that position, whether they're going to bring somebody from inside the organization and promote, whether Jackson is going to be both general manager and president, or whether they're going to bring in somebody from outside the organization. There's a lot to consider here, but most importantly, you should know as an Oilers fan, the Oilers are going to do whatever it takes to keep Draisaitl. You know why? Because it's going to make Connor McDavid happy. And I know that shouldn't be the barometer for managing a hockey team, but it's very clear the relationship those two players have, and frankly, how important Draisaitl and McDavid are to complementing each other on the power play. And I understand a lot of people don't like Draisaitl and McDavid, especially if you're on the outside looking in, if you're not an Oilers fan. So if you're a casual NHL fan who was just clicking through on YouTube or found the podcast organically, and you're like, I don't like Draisaitl. He wasn't even that good in the playoffs. Okay, that's fair. Draisaitl's is top 5 in points over the last 5 years. He's got a heart in there. He's had 3 50-goal seasons. He's gone over 100 points more than a few times. This is one of the 5 best players in the world when he's healthy. I have no qualms about saying that. Depending on how you feel about Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews, and then Cale Makar, or whoever you want to put in that conversation with Draisaitl for spots 2 through 5 in that list, that's fine. Draisaitl's right there with them. I don't have any hesitation. I take him before I take Kucherov or Pasternak or Panarin or Adam Fox or Quinn Hughes or Shesterkin or Mitch Marner or William Nylander. I can go on and on. Draisaitl is one of the 5 best players in the world. The Oilers are going to move heaven and earth to keep him. I do not see a world where they trade Draisaitl unless someone absolutely blows them away. You know, if somebody offers them the farm, you know, if somebody calls up and gives them the 2024 equivalent of what the Kings gave the Oilers for Wayne Gretzky back in the day, then maybe I could see a world where that happens. But Draisaitl's going to get a big ticket. He's going to get at least $12 million per year. I would be shocked. Frankly, I would be surprised if he doesn't reset the market and become the NHL's highest paid player with this contract, because the Oilers are going to take care of him. A, because it's the right thing to do morally because of the service they've given him. And B, there's no reason to believe he's going to have a major statistical fall off anytime soon. I know he's getting up there. He's close to 30. He's going to keep riding on the power play with McDavid, so the counting stats will be there. If they get him a complimentary winger who might be able to score a little bit more, might be able to do a little bit more too. And then real quick, Bouchard's going to get taken care of. The Oilers have 2 paths there. They can either bridge him and get him one more contract before they go the long-term deal. But I would imagine the Oilers are going to try and do what the Devils have done, where you get this young player who is very clearly part of your long-term future. You set them at a nice number. I imagine Bouchard's going to be asking for the starting price of that contract to be a 9. I understand that's a lot of money. You're going to be adding probably over $20 million to the books for the 2025-2026 season between Draisaitl and Bouchard extensions. Oh, yeah, and then McDavid needs an extension next summer going into the following year. So, whole lot of moving parts. And real quick, on Philip Broberg, he's not in this tier of important of getting Bouchard or Draisaitl taken care of. I imagine the Oilers are probably going to bridge Broberg along to keep his costs down because they need cost certainty and they need flexibility going forward because, frankly, they don't have a lot of cap space to play with. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to move on to that middle tier. We'll talk about all the unrestricted free agents in the bottom 6. We'll talk about the defensemen who may or may not be back for depth. Whole lot more, so be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. It is summer. That means concerts. That means baseball. That means being outside and going to as many events as you possibly can and soaking in the sun, which means you have got to check in with our friends over at Game Time. Next week, going to Yankees Red Sox on Friday. Looking forward to that. And I got my tickets through Game Time. Some of the best features in the ticket app industry. Things like zone deals, where you choose the section and Game Time picks the seats. All-in pricing, where they show you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views. This is my personal favorite. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know if stuff is going to be in your way, if you got a little railing to maybe put your drinks on, if you're sitting in the upper bowl where you don't have a cup holder, the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% difference. And the Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the industry. So take the guesswork out of buying baseball tickets, out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Want to thank everybody making Locked On Oilers a part of your Thursday. Whether this is first thing in the morning, on the way to work, on the way to school, or if you're a masochist in the gym getting a workout in to get your brain going, thank you. If it's the end of the day, you're trying to decompress after work, after school, or whatever you did today, I'm glad you're making time. And as the show transitions to the offseason, going to have a whole lot of fun stuff, because this is where my research skills, where my data analysis skills, this is where I can really flex my chops and really illustrate a more complete picture of the team, the league, individual players, a whole lot more enriching content. Not just, oh, the Oilers should get Jake Gensel, or the Oilers should try and bring in Steven Stamkos, because we got to be realistic. We've got to read the tea leaves as they're falling. And right now, the Oilers do not have a ton of room to operate with. So I'm going to share the Oilers cap-friendly page. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see over on YouTube. So this is what we're operating with. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 unrestricted free agent forwards, 2 unrestricted forward free agent defensemen, and Calvin Pickard, unrestricted free agent goalie. So I'm going to come back up to full screen. And now, with that many free agents, you're going to have to prioritize. You're going to lump them into different boxes for different priorities. In my opinion, the free agents the Oilers need to most be concerned with up front, I would really like to see Adam Henrique stay. I think he is a perfect third-line center. And and he did have a moment at breakup day on Wednesday afternoon where he had said, at this point in my career, it's not really about money. It is about trying to find a way to win the Stanley Cup. Adam Henrique, I don't think will be eligible for an over 35 contract, because I don't believe he'll be 35 before next season starts. So that's something to keep in mind, that they can't load up the money and deal with it down the road. Whether or not they would want to do that is a different story, because next summer they are going to take a lot of new money onto their books with Bouchard and Draisaitl getting raises that they deserve. So Henrique, Corey Perry, I could see staying, but frankly, based on how he's moved around a lot at this stage of his career, not sure he's going to want to stay long-term. I think Janmark is probably likely going to stay. I don't know about Sam Carrick. I don't know about Warren Fogle. I know there was some conjecture around the trade deadline this past year that the Oilers could be looking to move Warren Fogle for some cap relief in pursuit of making another move at the deadline. That ultimately didn't turn out to be the case, and I thought Fogle had a really solid playoffs. I thought him, I thought Janmark, I thought Connor Brown. As the rounds went on, there was less room out there, and you had to win foot races, you had to get pressure, and you had to cycle. I thought the Oilers' bottom six did a better job the later they went into the postseason. It's not a coincidence. You saw big goals come from Matthias Janmark and Adam Henrique and Connor Brown. Those guys were able to get the puck going, get into transition. You know, you talk about those shorthanded goals from Brown and Janmark. That is quintessential rush offense. You realize, oh, their defenseman pinched. I have a lane. I need to go. Of their free agent forwards, I think my priorities would be Adam Henrique, Matthias Janmark, and Fogle. I don't think they're going to be able to afford to keep Warren Fogle. I think Fogle is going to go to free agency and he's going to get a really nice number. He's probably going to get a contract that starts with a 4, maybe even a 5 from a desperate team that wants a grinder, a forechecker that maybe doesn't want to trade for maybe Andrew Mangiapane of the Flames, the prototypical grinder. You can play from first line down to third line. I think Fogle's going to get a nice contract, and I don't think it'll be from the Oilers because they have bigger fish to fry. That's not a knock on Warren Fogle, who I think is a really talented player and is frankly somebody I think a lot of teams would benefit from bringing his skill set into the mix. You need those forecheckers to round out your bottom 6 to effectively cycle teams to wear them down. You look at what Florida did with the pieces they prioritized. Every team needs their version of what Evan Rodriguez is. Warren Fogle can be pretty close to what Evan Rodriguez is. Corey Perry, it's up to him. If he only wants, 800-900, the minimum again, I think the Oilers would make that work. Whether he would play close to as many games, I don't know. If he's going to be an everyday player, if he's going to be situational, we don't know yet. Janmark, I think, will stay because the money will work. He's not going to command a lot of money. Frankly, he's got a nice role carved out for him here in Edmonton. Everybody loves the janitor, the shorthanded goal, the Game 7 goal. That matters. That will be remembered. I will remember that Matthias Janmark goal. And it's weird. Between Janmark and Draisaitl, I've talked a little bit about emotions. And usually when it comes to this time of year, free agency trades, I'm cold and calculating. I'm not thinking about, oh, well, this guy did this. I'm usually saying you can't pay guys for what they've done in the past. And frankly, you can't. That's how you get into trouble. But in the case of Draisaitl, this is one of the 5 best players in the world. You got to bite the bullet. If he resets the market for players, so be it. Bouchard, you can bridge him along, but you do run the risk that if he keeps playing at this level, he's going to play himself into a $10 or an $11 million per year contract. And I know at the outset, that sounds a little crazy for a defenseman. You got to remember, there's going to be a lot of new money in this system, and I'm talking about the league as a whole, because now we're actually going to start seeing the salary cap go up. This year, we're going from 83.5 up to 88, 89. Next year, 94, 95 maybe on the table, 100 on the table 3 or 4 years from now. All that new money in the system is going to get paid out. This is exactly what happened in the NBA, where the summer Kevin Durant was a free agent after Oklahoma City had lost to Golden State, and then Golden State lost to Cleveland in the NBA Finals to LeBron. They came back from 3-1, if you famously remember. There was a new TV deal that went into effect that summer, and every NBA team had about $20 million more in cap space to play with. Obviously, the NHL TV deal is about half of what the NBA TV deal was, so you're not going to see a $20 million increase in 1 year. You are going to see a good 5 to 10 going forward every year. And I know that sounds awfully optimistic for me to say about any Gary Bettman ran entity, because I don't think Gary Bettman has done a great job. I mentioned in the first segment that Bobby Holik was getting $9 million average annual value pre-2004. And Leon Draisaitl effectively laid less money than him this year, and that's 20-something years later. That doesn't seem right. But we're going to take one more quick break. We're going to come back. We'll start framing the conversation of where the Oilers are going to be looking, what types of skill sets they need, a whole lot more. So please be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. Thank you to everybody listening to this edition of Locked On Oilers. The offseason is tricky. I'm going to give you my little spiel here now because it's important. Twitter is no longer a great resource for information, but frankly, it is the only place sports media entities still break news. Nobody's breaking news on Instagram or on Threads or on Bluesky, on YouTube, on TikTok. Twitter is the best place for actionable information, but unfortunately, because of that, you have a lot of bad actors out there. You have a lot of people who are farming engagement, who are telling fans what they want to hear. And because of that, you are going to have a harder time sifting through the minutia, sifting through the aggregated content, the outright fabricated content. And it's going to make your experience as a hockey fan more difficult to know what's actually going on. I the other night after Game 7, when I saw the news that the Morello family was stepping away from the Coyotes, just period, they weren't going to try and reactivate them. I had to check like 5 times to make sure that was the real person who covers the Coyotes that tweeted that story, because frankly, it's really hard to know what to believe anymore because Twitter has gotten away with the traditional verified system that made it easy to know who was real and who wasn't. So that's my spiel. As for what the Oilers need to prioritize, number one, if this is a pipe dream like anything, they got to find a way to get out of Nurse's contract. If they have to eat half of it for the remaining 6 years, that's going to be very unpalatable just because you're going to have $4 or $5 million of dead money on your books going forward. That money is a lot more valuable than what Nurse gives them. Ekholm has entirely usurped him as the first pair left-handed defenseman. Darnell Nurse's most useful feature on this team is being a penalty killer and not a particularly good one. You find a way to get Draisaitl, you find a way to get Nurse's money off the books and you buy out Jack Campbell, that gives you more breathing room. Then we can start talking, okay, maybe we can do Fogle and Connor Brown, or maybe we can do Henrique and Janmark and Corey Perry. You have options. That's the biggest key to this time of year. You want to be as liquid as possible. And if you're not up on your finance parlance, liquid just means you're available, you have capital, you have money to move, and you can make transactions. That's what we mean in this context. In a hockey sense, being liquid is having cap space. You can always turn cap space into players, into draft picks. You cannot always turn a draft pick or players into more cap space. Sometimes you're going to have to eat money. You're going to retain salary on a bad contract you trade away, kind of thing. I'm trying to think what the most recent example of that is. I would say Barclay Goodrow, but that was a waiver claim, not a trade. So I'm going to come back to you on that one, but you need to be as liquid as possible this time of year because everything is going to happen very fast. There are a lot of names out there in the wind right now. Mitch Marner's name is out there. Jake Gensel, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Jacob Trouba, Max Domi, Tyler Bertuzzi. There are so many names out there in the wind that are either available as free agents or as trade candidates. And frankly, because news is going to happen very quickly, I would not be surprised if the Oilers maybe target people we're not thinking about. Would it really strike you as that outlandish if the Oilers brought in Patrick Kane in an over 35 contract and he only made like $1.5 million against the cap this year, but came back to playing at a pretty high level because he got to ride shotgun with Draisaitl or with McDavid? I could definitely see a world where Patrick Kane wants to inflate his counting stats a little bit to prove he's not cooked at age 35, and he very well might be. I wasn't particularly impressed with how he played in Detroit. I didn't think he gave particularly good effort at defense or at forechecking. I know those were never his fortes, even when he was healthy. But if the Red Wings just played a crumb more defense, they probably would have made the playoffs, and he actively contributed to a lack of defense. But there are a lot of possibilities out there. You heard me mention Bertuzzi. You heard me mention Max Domi. There are a lot of free agents who might be available. There are a lot of trade candidates out there who need a change of scenery. Who thought Pierre-Luc Dubois was going to get traded for Darcy Kemper? Can't say that was on my radar or something that might happen. This time of year, be ready for anything because anything can happen. The Oilers are going to have to make a lot of decisions very quickly. The first, they're going to have to name a general manager. Whoever it is, whether it's internal or external, they got to get that taken care of. I know they don't have a first-round pick in the drafts because they traded it for Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick. That's great. They need a general manager to have a game plan for figuring out Draisaitl, Bouchard, and the rest of free agency, or if they want to make a trade on the draft floor, if they want to turn those picks into a player somewhere else. If the Oilers want to turn a third-round pick into if the Oilers want to turn their second-round pick into, I was going to say Nick Foligno, but he's not very good anymore. If they want to turn their second-round pick into like Boone Jenner and have a real heavy guy to ride shotgun with Draisaitl, that would happen during the draft. Why would Columbus do that? I don't know. I'm just throwing names out there at you so you have some ideas. As far as priorities, the Oilers need to get or maintain their current speed. McLeod very much helps. Dylan Holloway very much helps. Warren Fogle, he helped. Matthias Janmark, he helped. Connor Brown, as he got going and as he looked more comfortable, he helped. You don't necessarily need to bring those specific guys back, but you can't lose that foot speed. And if you want to prioritize getting a little bit tougher, maybe a little bit bigger, that's okay, but it cannot come at the expense of team mobility. Part of the reason the Oilers were able to give Florida such a hard time in games 4, 5, and 6 was their speed. They got going in transition. They forced Florida's guys to play defense as individuals as opposed to a unit, and that really broke them down. They were able to get transition goals and make them happen. It's hard to do that when your guys aren't as fast and you're dealing with bigger plotting types. I like some of the more physical, imposing guys. I like Evan Rodriguez's game. He's a miserable, asinine hockey player who is just so annoying, where he's constantly doing the most petty, stupid stuff, but it's effective. You look at the playoff run Sam Bennett had. Every team in the league is going to say, well, where's our Sam Bennett? Where's our Evan Rodriguez? Where's our Nico Mikkola? I understand that's not how teams should operate, but that is how they operate. Teams love to look at what the most recent Stanley Cup winner did and then try and copy them. And then they're surprised why it doesn't work. You need to find a way to put your own unique spin on what worked. It's not just, oh, they had this player. It's, well, what about this player made them work here that was able to optimize this pair or this line in helping a team go on to win the Stanley Cup? That's the question. It's not, oh, this guy's good. Can we get him on the team? It's, why is this guy good? What is he good at that translates to his game? Is he a great skater? Is he a great shooter? Is he a great passer? Is he a great forechecker? Is he a great back checker? Is he a great defensive forward? Does he win faceoffs? Does he kill penalties? Can he play power play? You have so many questions to put into your evaluation of a player that you can't just look at the results and say, oh, we can put that right here. Great. Yes, in theory, if you put talented players together, they will figure it out. You run into the issue when you get redundant skill sets where guys are good at the same thing, so you have too much of one thing, and that makes you one-dimensional. That's where you don't want to be. So that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed. Wherever you get your podcasts, Apple or Spotify users, please be so kind. Leave the show a 5-star review. If you are watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. Let me know of the Oilers free agents, Sam Carrick, Corey Perry, Adam Henrique, Warren Fogle, Vinny Desharnais, Torrey Stetcher. They got a bunch. Let me know which of the free agents you want them to bring back the most in the comments below. I'll read some of them out in the episode tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.